Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick video about availability of what I believe to be the best configuration in the Microsoft Surface Pro 8 lineup. You're looking at it. It's the Core i5 with 16 gigs of RAM and a 256 gig SSD. It's priced at roughly $1,400 US, and finally back in stock in both colors at Best Buy. And I've included a link in the description. If you use it, it will help support more content here on the channel. And while some of you will say, couldn't we have just gone to MicrosoftStore.com? Well, let me tell you a little story. MicrosoftStore.com has a good return policy, and I respect it. In fact, that's where I had to make my pre-orders because it was the only place that I could make a pre-order on day one in order to ensure that I would have it in time to share with all of you. But had Best Buy been an option, I vastly prefer it because things are inherently smoother. And that is historical. It's not just this instance. So basically this dates back to Microsoft Store's launch. The first ridiculous thing that I had, at least with the .com end of things, was that they were not processing my form of payment. Nothing wrong with my credit cards, used two different ones. They just didn't like them and didn't take the money from the credit cards. This wasn't a fraud alert or anything like that. I took this all the way up the chain in terms of Microsoft Store support, and they had no idea why it happened. And this dates back to, again, the inception of the Microsoft Store. True story. And then beyond that, once they opened physical locations in the New York and New Jersey area, of course, things got a lot better. I was on first-name basis with local store managers. In fact, the experience there far exceeded the experience at Best Buy on any given day. But then, of course, I moved. I'm no longer in the tri-state area any longer, and that means no Microsoft Store because, well, quite frankly, they have nowhere near the same footprint as Best Buy, which pretty much no matter where you live in the U.S., there's one at least within 25 to 50 miles. For me, it's roughly 20 miles. So, with that said, that's already one really big reason. But even on the pre-order of this unit, I had an issue where it seemed they did trigger one fraud alert, and I, of course, let my credit card company know it was not fraud. And afterwards, and this was right around the 27th of September, so I figured they were getting ready to ship it, they never took the money. And I spoke with my credit card company to say, what's going on? Did you see a charge, and in what order were the charges? And they essentially said, look, you said it wasn't fraud. We gave them permission to take the money. They didn't take it. So then I became concerned that I was going to have to order this from Best Buy regardless because my pre-orders were not going to go through. And some of you might say, why not just speak to Microsoft Store support? Well, there is no one to talk to anymore. So historically, they always had U.S. call centers, and I don't know if this just started with the pandemic. It may have, but they no longer have phone support. And it actually was a little bit dizzying because there are still phone numbers you can call. And you might say, why not just deal with .com? Well, if the chat was functional and was easy to use, I would have. I always use chat before going to a phone, trust me. The phone always takes longer. But in this instance, human intervention was necessary and no avail, not possible. So they would take you through all the prompts. Oh, hold while we get you to that department. Hold while we get an agent on the line. And then the end message was, Microsoft no longer has phone support. Please go to blah, blah, blah for chat support. And then when I went there, I also couldn't get help. So long story short, while if your order goes through with Microsoft Store, it should be seamless. If it doesn't, be prepared to jump through some hoops. With Best Buy, if you want this model and you want to purchase it, you now know you can, and you're not going to have a problem. And that's not me saying Best Buy is the best experience in the world. You heard me at the beginning of this video, or not the beginning, but a few minutes ago, say that when Microsoft opened up their stores in both New York and New Jersey, all of a sudden I had access to much better support than I ever got at Best Buy. But once you're no longer in range of a physical store, you are at the mercy of what seems like one of the most user-unfriendly outfits out there. So it didn't used to be that way. Even their call centers used to be fantastic. Those days seem to be over. So while I love the Surface Pro 8, yes, you heard right, I think the Core i5 and Core i7 models are great. You already know I think the Core i5 is the sweet spot with the 16 gigs of RAM and 256 gig SSD at the $1,400 price point. Granted, you still have to pick this up, which is one of the reasons. And some of you will say, well, are these people just can't afford the i7? You know, I hate that mentality. Saying something is a value doesn't mean it's not something that someone can afford to purchase. In other words, the i7 model. When I talk about a value, I'm talking about what something is worth, not whether or not the individual has the means to purchase it. And of course, in some cases, people do not. Those of you who judge that, I feel sorry for you. The end of the story here is that we need these things to meet somewhere in the middle, meaning affordability and practicality, and that is what the i5 model here that is back in stock represents, in my opinion. Of course, everyone's entitled to their own. So, for those of you asking again whether or not the i5 has enough horsepower to do things like photo editing, video editing, it does. But if you plan on doing a lot of that, go with the i7. If you plan on doing light editing, light gaming, the i5 with 16 gigs of RAM will be perfectly fine. But if you're someone who's going to pretend this is a powerhouse, and no Surface Pro 8 in this lineup is, even the top spec model, which also, interestingly enough, sold out on Best Buy and is back in stock, the one with 32 gigs of RAM and a 1 terabyte NVMe along with the i7, I just think that you're confused because none of these are powerhouses. They are the most powerful Surface Pros ever, the nicest. They have larger displays at 13 inches, 120 hertz refresh rate, highest resolution, Thunderbolt 4 ports, which is arguably, in my opinion, the most important element that this machine was always missing. And you still have the, proprietary Connect charger, which means you don't have to use the trickle charge ports, which keeps them available. And since Thunderbolt 4 gives you the ability to do basically anything in an I/O perspective, that's great. You've got, a camera here on the back that shoots decent stills, 4K video. We now have a full HD camera on the interior for video conferencing, which is the best in the business. The keyboard has improved, but that extra $280 for the keyboard pen combo, well, that's the headroom this affords you. Now, if you know you want the i7, if you absolutely must have it, you can get it for a mere $256 more, or excuse me, $200 more. Listen to me with the $256. Keep seeing my reflection in that Microsoft logo. It's a little crazy. But $200 more will afford you this exact same configuration with an i7. So you don't have to spend, a world's worth of difference in order to get the i7. I just don't know if it's worth the extra $200 when you know you have to have this, the keyboard. So I think that money is better spent going towards the keyboard, something you know you're going to buy, because there's no point in buying the Surface Pro 8 if you're not going to pick up the signature keyboard with pen. Now, you want to spend $400 more and go to the i7 with a 0.5 terabyte NVMe, which is the other machine I've been reviewing. That is a big enough leap that you could easily buy one of the NVMe's that you see back there in the background. And, basically get at least 1 terabyte, maybe more, depending on the deal, this coming Black Friday, the holiday season. And so that renders the whole, Surface Pro 8 doesn't have enough storage issue moot. So hopefully this video helps. Again, the Surface Pro 8 in the best value to performance ratio is back in stock at Best Buy. Link is in the description. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe and please stay safe. Later.